A very insightful Good Signs coming your way.
Yes, welcome back to an episode of Good Signs, our monthly or almost
Ish.
monthly, yes, everything with us is an ish, um, episode of what's bubbling up over the last four, although here it is five, newsletters and things that you should be watching. And we cover quite a lot. We
We
talk
do.
about less is more in a way that I don't feel like we've talked about in the same way, but certainly something that I would consider a trend more than a sign. We talk about tracking versus treating and really seeing yourself as a service and like adding value and not just data.
Yep.
We talk
Great
about,
examples.
yeah, we talk about made in China, wanted in China, and how the perception of brands is completely changing in China for those that are made there. Very, very
And I
interesting.
think this is going to be a fascinating one to watch of then how it comes back and is interpreted through the US as well.
Totally. Which we do actually talk a little bit. And then
We do get
we
into it.
have easy density. Yeah, yeah.
Yep.
We talk about easy density, which is about GLP-1s, and nutrition density, which is something we've talked about many times, or at least I've written about many times, which is maybe how it ended up in this newsletter or in this podcast. And then the very last one is we talk about how institutions are cool again, but there is a big asterisk next to that because it's not every single institution, and you'll have to just listen to it to understand what I mean.
Right. But it's a really beautiful movement that I think a lot of brands can, will, and should be partaking in. So enjoy it.
Enjoy.
Hey everyone, it's Chris.
And Kirsten.
Welcome to Good Thinking Weekly, the podcast where we discuss the best of the best in brands, marketing, and culture.
Thousands of people, top execs from the likes of Complex, Klaviyo, Walmart, Wall Street Journal, and LVMH tune in every single week.
We run a creative consultancy in Good Co, so we know what it takes to build a good brand.
Subscribe on YouTube, your favorite podcast app, and Good Thinking on Substack for more.
All right, let's dive in.
I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Quick word from our sponsor, the Kiva Dine Agency.
So Kiva and I go way back. She actually placed me in a job years ago, so I can vouch firsthand.
She's a recruiter that CEOs and CMOs call when culture fit really does matter, and it's much more than a resume.
Her contact info is in the show notes. Reach out to her. You'll be glad you did. Welcome back to Good Thinking and another amazing episode of Good Signs.
Amazing. We're not even in it yet. How do you know it's going to be amazing?
It's been a minute. I'm beyond excited to be back doing this with you. It's been a few weeks, and I know it's going to be amazing because the letters have been.
It has been a few weeks. Kirsten is back from Africa, and we are back on a podcast that isn't just a delightful guest episode, although the guest episodes have been very good.
They have been. We've had some great people.
Very good.
Yes, yes. And if there's someone you think we should have on, I would love to hear that.
Yes. And if you want to sponsor the podcast, you can also.
Oh, right. We have sponsorships now. This one's sponsored. Here we are.
Yeah, we are. It's all things growing up here. But
yes.
Since we know that's not really true, we can get into the actual work and stop lying to you.
Right. Here we go.
All right. So, as you know, titles are always changing, and I am not committed to the title that we air on the podcast. Titles are only, whatever makes it into the Substack. You heard it here first. All right. So sign number one is a sign that I would say is not new to us.
Do we need an overview of signs? Usually you do a little, these aren't trends. And I go, maybe they are trends.
All right. So welcome to Good Signs. These episodes are always things that aren't necessarily trends, but things that are bubbling up that I think are interesting or that we think are interesting or that are kind of bubbling up in the last 4 letters. I will say this is 5 letters because we are a week overdue on signs because someone had a holiday.
Sorry.
Which is a good thing.
Sorry.
Vacations are important. So
yes,
we have 5 letters covered here, and I think there's, so the first sign that we're talking about, I'm calling less is becoming more. But to be honest, this is not a new sign. We could probably call this a trend. You heard it here first.
All I'm saying is many of these are becoming trends. So
yeah. And this is not about, there's so much conversation around analog and IRL and switching off. And it's all related to that. in its essence, but this is not what this is about. We also have talked about not scaling, and there's also some elements of that in here. But what this is about is, in my opinion, which is also related to those two other things that I spoke about, is that we are speeding up as a culture, as we're like, work has never been this fast. The rate of change has never been this quick. But it's not just about a rejection of that. It's also seeing it as like, that's not the only way. And I think at the moment we have this, uniform belief that it's like, if something doesn't happen with Claude in 2 minutes, like it's not being done quick enough. That seems to be the vibe. And I am the first person to say, like, I build a lot of things with Claude and I do enjoy it, but it's exhausting, the pace of this kind of work.
Yes.
And I think that these trends that we're going to talk about are coming out of not just a rejection of that, but a realization that that's not always the right answer. Like, I think it's the default answer at the moment, but it's not necessarily always the right answer. So the first trend is Cezanne deliberately coming out and saying, we're taking this down a notch. We're going to slow down. We're going to grow up. And now, if I'm putting words in her mouth, I might be, because, there's a lot of these interviews and like remembering every single one of them. But it sounds like, to me, Cezanne has realized that, yes, expansion can be messy. 2, like they were heading on a trajectory, I would say, of like fast fashion-ish. It was like adjacent fashion, right? Like it was like getting to the point where they were, like you'd go on and I will say they've always had a lot of product. They've had hero products, but they've always had a fair amount of products. Not like a brand that came out from the gates and just had 5 SKUs. Like they've always had a lot of SKUs online.
Yep.
But more than ever. And I think the quality of those SKUs and the sort of universal, I would say that the quality of the brand kind of had started, the vision of the brand had started to become diluted. So it sounds like they're pulling back and saying, what are we as a brand? Like where do we want to sit in terms of price point, in terms of scale, and also who the customer is? And like, are we actually still doing that? Like, are we on the right path? And I think it's really interesting because I've been a fan of Cezanne for easily, I don't know, let's say 8 years.
A long time. Yeah. I mean, I think this is interesting because this is a brand that we talk about actually a lot. And anytime we're in a city that has a store, we go in. I think oftentimes, more recently, our hopes are a little bit higher than kind of actually what we find. And I think I've seen kind of challenges in store merchandising their product. I don't think they've ever kind of unlocked, but I think this is just interesting because it's a brand that's been out. They actually closed the one in Brentwood Country, but I don't know if I told you that. And I think it's fascinating both from a PR angle, but also just from a true integrity, thoughtful angle of a retail brand like this to really be like, they're kind of pressing the stop button, and they're intentional about it to really kind of reconfigure how they should show up. And I think that's really admirable. And I think it's really smart.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, it sounds like it's very early and it's just kind of like a decision that's been announced and it's a trajectory. And who knows, like maybe they took too much capital. They raised, like they grew too fast. Like there's always so much more story than you actually think. And whoever is like kind of spinning this story for them is doing it well, if that's the case. But I think it's interesting to see a brand come, like, if you want to just even unpack that as a strategy, like even if that's what's happening, right?
Exactly.
That's an interesting strategy. And it's interesting to see the number of people who've written about it and said, hey, like I agree with this strategy and I think that this is what they need to do. And that in and of itself is interesting. Like just the fact that it's worked, that if even whatever side of the story is true, and maybe it is true, like maybe it's just on the surface true, but that is interesting, that's appealing to people.
Yeah, I completely agree because again, like it's a rad brand that we've had on the radar, but I wouldn't say it's kind of a big retail brand that most people or many people are talking about. So I just think it's smart, and I think they're doing it for the right reasons. So I think I love this.
Yeah. So the second example that I have under less is becoming more is there's this company, and it's an AI company, naturally.
Yeah, of course it is.
But what was interesting about it was that they were talking about this founder. The article goes into several companies, but it was like an interview with one of the founders, and the founder was basically saying, I'm building really fast. Like as a company, so they were saying that the way that they build, And I had to explain models to Kirsten today. So I will explain it in case you are not aware of models, though namely this is very obvious to everyone else listening, is that there are different models inside of the LLM. So for example, inside of Cloud Code, you have Haiku, you have Sonnet, you have Opus, and then you have Fable. These are all different levels.
But this I knew, but I didn't know I know that there's different models, but the complexity and the detail that you shared, I think, is really helpful of what they're actually doing and what they're for.
Yes. I mean, if I'm an expert in this, then we're in trouble.
You're an expert now. I mean,
but essentially, like they are, well, they're related to the release date, right? So it's like, Sonnet came out a while ago, Opus, then, and they're generally, then this is probably not true, but generally speaking, it's like sort of a timeline, like of advancement. Like, so Fable is the most recent, but actually there's Sonnet who came out. There's this other one, Opus, I don't know, whatever number. There's various releases, and Fable is the most advanced model, but it's maybe not the most recent model, if that makes sense. Fable has the ability to do really wild things. Like, my husband's a mathematician. The things that it's able to do with math would blow your mind if you're in math.
But I think that's one of the interesting things was how different the different model, like to me, I would just assume they're like software updates, right? Like this one is this, the next version of that, but how different they are depending on what you need.
It's kind of like that. I mean, they also just run through tokens at different rates. So like Fable is the most powerful model, but it's also the most costly model. And so I don't use Fable all the time. Anyway, we're not here to give an AI class. But anyway, but one of the things that's interesting with this founder is that they were saying that they time their sprints to the release dates of these models, right? So Fable is coming out. This is a time where we have to build hard to gain advancement during the time of big change, right? Because as Fable came out, like people were like, whoa, like there's, you went from being able to do pretty much like basic math, but pretty poorly, to doing like next level, like solving problems that haven't been solved in 100 years. Like it's pretty wild. So businesses are timing their sprints of own advancement. So it's like suddenly we have this new tool. It's like suddenly we gave you a wheel, right? But before you never had a wheel, right? So now you have a wheel, and now you can do all this thing that you've never had a wheel before. Like suddenly you can build all these new things, right? Like suddenly we can get water out of the ground.
It's a great analogy. Yes, I'm with you.
So they're timing, and then they have to sprint really hard to maintain their level, because otherwise someone's going to come in and build with this model and take over your bits, right? So that's basically like a short, very poorly described situation that's happening in startups. But this means that we are sprinting, and sprinting in tech world has always existed, right? But the ability to move your business from like point A to point B used to be like that you would sprint on and off for a couple of months, right? This is like sprint, like your life depends on it over the next 2 weeks, to the point where you don't sleep, you don't eat, you don't leave.
Mm-hmm.
And then people are people are building in like actual like interim sabbaticals through these builds, because they're essentially like an entire team, an entire organization sprinting nonstop for several weeks, like all of a sudden, and then they take a break, recalibrate, see all the things that they have broken and fixed and have to refine, but also actually taking time off. And I think it's interesting because I do think, I think spend a lot of time on plans, but also on myself, thinking about the future of work and the future of productivity and the future of like where things are going. And I think that it's looking like, obviously soon we'll be at the point where models and agents are also always building on their own. So as you're taking breaks, you're not really taking a break, right? But anybody who's worked with agents, even the most advanced, know that you kind of have to be there to chaperone them. Like that's the best way to get anything out of them. But this is actually building in deliberate breaks. And I think it will change how businesses are structured, right? Like, it's like, okay, you're going to, like, you don't have your 14 days of PTO anymore, right? You have 6 scheduled sabbaticals throughout the year where you don't know when they're going to be necessarily. Like, there's a model advancements are happening kind of a lot, or that may change with government intervention, but that's a whole other story in another podcast.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it is a lot. It is a lot. And are they really taking the rest? But to me, this just goes into the notch of like how, like, as impactful as like the change of the industrial evolution, like that's what this is. Like, it's a complete change of workforce, all everything that's happening with AI, with workforce, with culture, with this just to me adds to that list.
And in general, like, I mean, again, this is a whole probably podcast in and of itself of like, what does the workplace look like in 3 years or 2 years?
Yes, it is.
Do we even have one? But like, it would be not entirely impossible that you start to see the night shift come back in a very big way, because there's so much happening. People coming in, and it's like suddenly your entire product has been changed overnight, and like you need to kind of like to that and take the day to like kind of like see if you can. And models are doing so much work on their own that so many things that humans are doing now in tech companies is just really chaperoning things along. It's very different. So I just think it will be interesting culturally to see if, like, does the night shift come back? Do we start to have sabbatical culture? Do we have shifts of work where it's like, you're working for 2 weeks and then someone else is coming into work for 2 weeks because it's just literally too much? Or do we just not have a workplace at all because the AI is doing everything? So
right. Yeah, I mean, I think it's fascinating. There's so much conversation to be had around this, because we've been all arguing about work from home, and maybe that's like such a moot point, because actually how we're going to be working is more of the conversation and what that looks like. And this is certainly, I think, part of that. So fascinating.
Yes, and understanding that if we want humans to add value in the way that we know humans do add value, humans need to be rested, and humans need to be thoughtful, creative human beings, and we will value that and create space for that to stay as our like biggest strength. Then we need to actually have work systems that actually deliver on that, and maybe finally that will be prioritized,
which would be amazing.
To be determined.
But the fact that somebody's doing this, great.
Yeah, it's interesting. I always feel like it's the fringes, obviously, right? But like tell you where things are going. And then the last example is Ditto, which is a new dating app. I think it's out of the UK. Have you been on Ditto?
I have not yet.
Okay. It actually doesn't really seem like your kind of dating app, to be fair. It's like too curated. I think you enjoy the non-curated chaos of your dating apps as entertainment value. But Ditto basically has decided to, like go the other direction to like swipe culture, where it's like thousands of, you just like, it's almost like the doom scroll of dating, right? And then sending one single curated match every Wednesday at 7 p.m. That's it. So it's like every Wednesday at 7 p.m. you're going to get one match. That's it. And
this is the one where there's no images, right?
Maybe it's also no images. And it is using AI, but it's supposed to be like a little bit of a smarter AI, where it's not just like about your interests. It's really more about your personality style and the way that you kind of engage. And so, but it's what I think is interesting about it is the limited likeness of it. Like, it's like people are and they've had a lot of signups. And again, it just goes to show people are over fucking whelmed by choice. Like, I've said this so many times. We've talked about it in the trends, like 2026 trends, many, many times, like under travel, but under other things, is there's too much choice. And we've defaulted to 57 different kinds of spa treatments instead of one great spa treatment, Yeah. And it's not to say that there isn't a market for a person who wants the 27, but there is also a very deep market for less.
Yes. I mean, I remember, I don't know if we can call it the age of authorship breakdown or however we're going to refer to that in years to come. But that was kind of one of the very first comments. It was kind of this exhaustion. And this is totally what I feel in all of this. Like, we are overwhelmed and it is exhausting. I mean, I just had my, kind of like breakdown session of my frustration with Claude with you today. And it's like, there's just so much to it and so much going on with it that there is just this overwhelm and exhaustion. And I think these all point to that and are hopefully solves towards that.
Yeah, but there's also this belief that you have to be able to be productive on a level that like is just like unbelievable. Like, the expectation of your own productivity is higher than ever.
Yeah, I think that's a societal one, though, that we just, Like we got to get out of our own way in that.
Nice.
But yes,
Don't know if that's happening.
but
Anyway.
that's another therapy session.
So speaking of more, so the pendulum swing that we have in here is Google. Google is such an amazing company. So like, and I think everybody is always like on a like can't Google out train. So this is not a can't Google out train. It's just really pointing to something that I think big companies in general suffer from. And it's something that has happened over time that newer companies don't have because of how lean new companies are. But Google, so Jeff Dean, who is like basically like the godfather of like computers and AI, he left to create his own company. This is a huge deal at Google. Like this is like the guy. It's like Steve Jobs leaving almost. Like if you want to like put it like that. And so it's very serious. They're taking it very seriously. The stock market took it very seriously. But he said in an interview recently that when he had a chat GPT like bot that was used internally at Google in his team that essentially like you could talk to just like you talk to an LLM. And they had it years before chat GPT came out and became like the chat. But obviously it's like ChatGPT has evolved into having so many other things, and that's just one element of ChatGPT, like very small element, but one that most consumers interact with, like the most basic version. And it didn't ship because they said that it was, like it was second guessed. It wasn't right. Like they wanted to refine it. And when you listen to how, say, like a group at Anthropic works, where their innovation team is like 10 people deep, 5 people deep, and they're shipping products without even talking to one another. They're just shipping them and seeing if people like them. They're shipped like cloud code in 5 days. Like it's really like a completely different way of working. And I think there's going to be this big reckoning, and I think everybody knows this, but there's, especially in tech, there's a very big reckoning happening with layers of bureaucracy. And I mentioned it many, many times in the age of authorship, that I think this is something that is coming from a culture issue, and brands are going to have to address this very quickly because it's a mindset issue of people coming in. Like the best people coming into Google, if they're hiring from, say, Anthropic, are not going to be used to with this kind of layer of bureaucracy or want to. So it's just an interesting time to see businesses, and businesses haven't liked bureaucracy for years, decades, but it's still very much a feature.
Well, I think, this makes me want to, bring our internal culture talk to like every brand out there and scream it from the hills, because this is something that I think, again, going back to like how the entire workplace is changing. It's always been, bureaucracy's always been there, but I think it's more harmful than it's ever been. And this is a great example of that. And that it won't allow companies to be successful. It'll just, stop you. If you're going to operate with that type of culture, like culture's never going to be more important. And balancing those two innovative things of being able to be innovative, being able to be creative and better done than perfect. But also like, Anthropic's got something going for them and they have a way of communicating, even if, in putting something out there that it's certainly to a certain level. So it's like really figuring out that balance.
Yeah. It's very, I think Anthropic has its own issues, but like, internally it seems at least that they could ship products that they're making.
Right. From a culture, they seem to, yeah.
Yes. Yeah. All right. Should we move on to sign number 2? Because we're already 20 minutes in and, we're only here for an hour.
Yes.
All right. So moving on. So the second trend or sign I'm calling is tracking to treating, which again, perhaps we brought this up. I always think that it's so interesting to kind of go in and see these and like what's bubbling up consistently. So
this is the perfect time to mention that we now have sponsorships. So stay tuned for a message from our sponsor.
Enjoy. This episode is brought to you by the Kiva Dine Agency.
Full disclosure, Kiva actually placed me in a job years ago, so this one's pretty personal.
I do love Kiva's energy. That's definitely what makes her and her agency stand out to me. Her philosophy is more that recruiting is a creative skill and not a database search.
100% could not agree more. And I think that's really why CEOs and CMOs call her when they're building out their leadership teams, because they're not just filling a seat.
Yeah, I would say it's culture fit.
For sure. So if you're hiring or thinking about your next move, Kiva's the one to call.
All right, link in the show notes. So the way that I have been thinking about this is that for a really long time, like there was an entire service industry that was revolving around just giving you your data. like Oura Ring, say, right? It's like you put the Oura Ring on and you get your sleep score. Like that's a business just to give you your data. There was also like, an entire decade where marketing was entirely based on like, did this click through like thing do its thing? Like, it's like data. Data was the job, essentially.
Yep.
Data is no longer the job. Everybody can get data. We have data out of the eyeballs. Like we've all got a gazillion bits of data. AI can give you more data than you've ever had before. Like no shortage of data. But everybody has the data now. Like it's not proprietary to have data. Like my phone tracks what like half the things that an Oura Ring tracks. Like I don't have to have a new device for it. Like data is just not interesting. So what's emerging is that like people are having to add value. And like the first example I have of this is honestly like not somebody who focused on data before, but I do think it's about kind of adding like tracking or maybe tracking is not the right word for this brand. I'm talking about Bobby, but it's more of a like, it's like adding value to the service. So maybe we'll rename this one. But Bobby came out with something called the Feeding Concierge, which is essentially an AI that they built on their own proprietary data, right? So like they do have that data that they're using of like, this is the information that over the years, like customer feedback, like from pediatricians, from moms, like all of this information that they had, they took all this data, they trained a custom AI on it, and they made a series of features so that you now have a 24/7 like bespoke AI agent that you can just like in the middle of the night, which is basically the only time that you have feeding questions for whatever reason that is. Like it's like all of your most pressing feeding baby questions happen at 3 a.m. when no one's awake, is to come on and so you can talk to it. They also have expert-led virtual circles, and then they also have one-on-one consulting. So they have all of these additional features now to the Bobby like cans of formula business that they're kind of adding and layering on with their data. The other example I have in here is MyFitnessPal going from like tracking your calories and tracking kind of like your macros into actually using that to train an AI to create a nutrition coach that now can really like answer your questions. So it's like, hey, I didn't meet my macros. Like, what do I do? Or, hey, I noticed that you're not consistently meeting the goals that you set for yourself. Here's what I recommend you eat, or here's what you could get at a Chick-fil-A that would help you. Please don't eat a Chick-fil-A. And then the last thing is Dumbo Health, which is a sleep-focused platform, so kind of sleep tracking, essentially. But they're also adding in hardware, like to relate to, so essentially like taking that sleep tracking, because I think it's more around kind of like sleep apnea and things like that, taking that and saying, okay, we're going to use that data to also create bespoke hardware, but we're also going to offer physician like interpretations of your data, because they realize that data on its own is really kind of an insufficient thing for consumers today. Like nobody's like, I have sleep apnea and now I don't want to solve it. Like, it's like, no, this is no longer sufficient to just tell somebody that they're not sleeping well. They need to know, right, how do I actually sleep well? How do I solve this problem?
Yes, I think this is named very accurately, tracking to treating. I think taking the data and actually making it bring value and be useful is exactly what we need. And I think I love, as always, how Bobby's doing it. It makes total sense. And I hope that people use it. I think, having an AI for brands needs to be done in a certain way. And I, no doubt they're going to do it in the right way. But I think this is a really smart evolution and makes a lot of sense for these brands. And I'm sure we'll see more and more of this.
Yeah. And then in the pendulum swing, because as you know, if you listen to this regularly, pendulum swings are kind of like loosely like things going in the other direction that are also happening. And one of the things that I wrote about is that recently is that there's so many. I mean, I literally like get so many pitches and inundated with ads, and it's just incessant with like here's this editing tool, like you just take this video and we make your full video, or here's like, create an it, like you don't even need to be in there, you can just create an AI version of yourself. Like 11 Labs sent me an ad the other day that was like, this entire ad was created with AI, and I'm like, oh wait, anyway, let's not.
Just what you want to hear.
But the thing that I see most often is the AI tools that brands are, or that people on the inside, on the creative industry, they are really excited about, stuff that like is really like tedious shit that they don't want to be working on, right? Like you create an ad and you need to resize it a zillion times, and there are entire agencies that built their business model around that, and like that's a problem. But like they're not going to be. But like nowadays, like Canva, like you go in and it's like, hey, I can make a gazillion different versions of this, dynamic text, like all of that stuff. That stuff is great. I will say that now with both like LinkedIn filters, Instagram filters, YouTube filters, all of them now are flagging AI content, and they'll flag it even if it's background removal, like, which is basically like the bread and butter of like anyone's ever used AI ever. Like, it's like like that's the first AI creative tool that you probably tried to use because it's the most like useful thing in the world because that takes so long. But you don't even think of it as AI, right? Like, it's just like, of course this should exist, but it will be flagged now. So it's because of the EU law changes. So the EU has made it mandatory that anything AI generated in terms of imagery is flagged as AI generated. There's no like degrees of this at the moment. It's just going to be AI generated. Went into effect, I think maybe last week.
Right. So that's what's bringing around all of the changes, which I think is helpful for people to know.
Yeah. So that's what's spurring this change. But like the flags and the filters haven't gotten as smart as kind of the computers are just saying like, well, so essentially it's saying the metadata. So anything you create, like it's like, oh, the metadata on this, like I know it was an AI tool was used and therefore you get the flag. But it's not like which AI tool did you use? Is this is it a completely fabricated video, like where the person isn't real, the backgrounds aren't real, the clothes aren't real, like the product's not real? Or is it, you use the background remover on your product photo because you took a photo on a blue background and now you want it on a, you want a transparent background.
Right.
They're equivalent currently. So it is interesting to see. It'll be interesting over the next weeks, months to see how this affects brands, or if AI generated actually becomes kind of like something that you are trained to ignore because essentially everything becomes AI generated flagged. And so you just become like immune to looking at it and therefore it does nothing anymore. So should
very
be
much a possibility. Yeah, very much a possibility. And I think your point as far as really thinking about what we want AI to do, the tedious things that we don't want to do versus the things that we do want to do, which I think there's 1,000 memes out there about that, but I think it's really true.
Yes. All right. So number 3, I'm calling Made in China, Wanted in China. So for a really long time, and this is a broad generalization, and I don't pretend to be an expert in the Chinese market, but generally speaking, like Chinese grown brands were considered to be sort of like less than like maybe luxury brands or like sportswear brands that were from the West, right? Like, so brands would come in and it'd be like, yes, I want the Louis Vuitton bag over the luxury bag, like, yada, yada, yada. But now we're starting to see a shift, and this has been written about by people who are much more knowledgeable about it than me, including Following the One. Like, it's like there's like Yeling, there's a lot of really great people writing about this, so follow them. But starting to see like Nike going on to trail runs and not getting the same share as, say, a Chinese brand like Fugas, like coming in. The Kalis Fugas. I don't know if that's how you say that. But anyway, like you're seeing more people choose a Chinese brand. And then there's also Adidas coming out, and they created their own. So they've rebranded the Terex brand, which is your hiking shoe brand.
Yep.
They've rebranded it in China to have its own name, but the name means something like mountains, water. It's something very, very poetic. I won't even butcher it. But one of the things that's interesting about it is that they deliberately created this sub-brand, and it's not unusual to create a sub-brand in China for the Chinese market. But when you look at it, it's like a softer, like there's a lot of outdoor hiking happening in China, like a lot of interest in outdoors that previously didn't exist. But And the Chinese government is maybe partially responsible for that because they're actually like investing in it. But anyway, it's less of a like rugged look, and it's a softer, more gentle look than like maybe like Western outdoor gear, which typically goes quite rugged.
Yep.
So it's not just like a brand name change and a look and feel change, but it's literally like a vibe change of the entire line.
That's fascinating.
And then the last example I have in here is a Shanghai-based sneaker brand called Pain. They did a very, very cute like collab with Head, the tennis ball brand or racket. I guess they also make rackets. And it's very, very cute and like very popular. And like previously, there's just a lot like brands that are from China no longer have the stigma in China as being less than.
Right. And I think it's interesting that aesthetically they're being tweaked specific to that market as well. And then I wonder how that would be interpreted here,
Yes.
We get to see a new Terex line. That's fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, would that actually, I think there's a fairly big amount of people in the US who would be interested in a less rugged outdoor brand.
Right. And I think, like next gen, I think for sure. That sounds appealing.
For sure. Yeah. And then in the pendulum swing, I brought up the BYD, which is a car brand, a really big car brand. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
Mm-mm.
It feels like it would fall into your category of like interest. It's a brand that's for sure gaining traction in Europe, like as an electric car brand. I think BYD stands for like Beyond Your Dreams, I think, which is weird. But but they go by BYD. But if you go into European circles of luxury like car buyers, like you will inevitably hear people reference this brand. So if it hasn't made it to the US in terms of ubiquity yet, like it's coming. And I think it's interesting because what we're seeing is like, like if I said, hey, it's a Chinese luxury car brand, like maybe 3 years ago, what would you have said? What would your feelings about it have been?
Yes.
And the reality is that
not elevated.
Perception too is changing. So,
I mean, I think it's fascinating the larger change within kind of the market of China. And then again, like how then we'll interpret that is always kind of my lens. Like, obviously it sounds like it's being interpreted really well in China. And but then how will Americans then want to get those brands as well? And how will it influence kind of what happens here?
Yeah. And I will say, so the reason I brought up BYD before when I was referencing in the newsletter, the example I was giving is that they're actually starting to roll out robots in their showrooms. And it's interesting because they're just like, car salesman, I think it goes car salesman, influencer, and then lawyer, and then everyone else in terms of trustworthiness, something like that. But like car salesman is like, I think pretty much the bottom. And so it's interesting to see, like, there's a lot of interest. I have a lot of interest again in like sort of future thinking of like how will robotics and how will that play into kind of the daily life of like running a brand. And I think it will be big, much like you like didn't have robotic little delivery service vehicles like running around LA 2 years ago. And now they're just about everywhere, right?
Yeah,
I think that we will see places where it really makes sense, where customer service is actually like not seen as good, like a place like a car sales situation, where a human being doing that is actually maybe less trustworthy than a robot that is like.
I mean, you can see the conversation that they must have had, just in like, well, it can't get worse. It can't get worse than a car salesman, so we might as well throw a robot in there.
Yeah. I mean, robots right now is very much in its novelty era,
Yes.
I think. If you like think about Ken and like how people are using robotics, it's like robot as like, I don't know, it's like the equivalent of the like waving.
Yes.
Like
the Tesla
it's
robot
like,
at South
we have a
by.
robot here for you to like ooh and ah. South by had Tesla. I like constantly get emails from somebody who must have had one at Cannes because they're like, did you see the robot? Do you want to write about it? And I was like, I would have written about it if I wanted to write about it. Right. But I think that will change. And what's also interesting is that they're going to be using it like, hey, like what are the questions that people consistently answer? or ask the robot, right? Or are they different to the questions that they would ask a human being and things like that? So I think they're going to be using that over
Right,
time, and
right.
that will
I
also
think
be
that's interesting. Yeah, an anonymity because of that. Yeah, I mean, I think of the robots that are here, like Waymos and the food delivery services, and we're past like being like, oh, that's weird, or oh, I don't trust it, or we're like, I'm going to put my kids in a Waymo way easier than I'm going to an Uber. So like we're past the acceptance. It would be
right.
interesting to see.
Yeah, and I think there is a
where they'll
trust
play.
issue with certain human cases that like I would put car salesmen in that situation, similar
Car
to
sales.
like
Sorry if any car salesmen are listening. Sorry.
yeah, but it's just interesting to see and like how will like my behavior. So I introduce your kids to Waymo, right? And I was explaining to you, like I was like, yeah, like when I get into Waymo, like there's different things that I'm thinking about in terms of safety, but they're not like, is this car gonna be like, is this driver gonna be reckless? Like, there's just things that go away, and it will be very interesting to see sales associates. Like I think about getting shoes from a sales associate in a shoe store, and that is always like inevitably like a frustrating process. Like it's like I asked you for a shoe size, and then it's like 45 minutes later you come back with like not the shoe I wanted and
a different one in a different size.
Yes, and it's like, oh, we didn't, and it's like I feel like that's a perfect use case for robotics, right? It's like put the shoe
Nike
in.
Town used to have that where you would just come up in the compartment. You'd be like, "Here's your shoe."
Right. That
bring that back.
It's coming.
Yes,
it's coming back.
Yeah, there's opportunity for it. I think one of the things that's going to be really interesting is the anonymity in that, because how will you respond? How will you be different than you would if it was a human being? I think that's key.
Yeah, and when you don't feel like maybe you're being sold to, but maybe you will be, so it'll be interesting.
Yeah,
so many things. The future is changing.
It is.
All right. So number 4, we have as easy density. And so for a really long time, like obviously like optimization and like, shortcuts to a routine and like putting supplements on, none of this is new, right? But what I do think is new is that GLP-1s have, and we've talked about this many times, have increased the need for nutrient density. Like you literally are eating so much less that you are unable to eat as much, that you, with the small amount of meals you have to have a certain level of nutrient density. Otherwise your muscles are going to start to like do bad things, like your hair starts to fall out, like, and because partially it's also like very quick, right? Like, so it's like you might, if you're a person that ate very small meals for your entire life, like this is probably not a problem. But if you ate all of these things and suddenly it's like, oh, well, you're getting like, 450% less of a certain vitamin because you are eating much less. Like if you're eating much less cheese and you're getting way less calcium, for example, right? But you're doing that suddenly, like you're going off a cliff, off a cheese cliff.
Right.
Then
I mean, that's one cliff I'd go off. I think we've been off that cliff before.
I want to go off the cheese cliff. I want to be on the cliff with the cheese. Me and cheese on the cliff together forever.
Yeah.
But anyway, so there are brands coming out to kind of solve this. So we have Plant Chi, which is like a nutritional seasoning. It's like a topper that you can put on your meals that like adds flavor, like in terms of like seasoning. But it also is packed with certain kind of micronutrients and like things like that you would be missing if you're eating less. There's another one, Claire, that's like an all-in-one nutritional supplement that is targeted specifically at GLP-1 users who are, now struggling to get the protein that they need. Like literally, like how do you get as much protein as you need is something I hear on a daily basis. Like, how do you do it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the daily struggle for certainly
everyone.
Women over 45, 40.
Yeah, I mean, I sat with somebody. I went to lunch with a friend in Chicago who was using her ChatGPT or Claude, whoever. She was taking photos of the menu and asking it to rank the menu items based on protein like density.
Wow, that's fascinating.
And it was interesting what it came back with, actually, which is like maybe on the surface, maybe not the choice that she would have made. Like she went for like a pulled pork bowl or something that like was like, she was like, I would just never typically like want to eat that much meat, but because like it suggested it, I was suddenly like more inclined to choose that option because I knew that it was going to give me better protein density. So anyway, something to think about as your menu planning is that people are apparently scanning your menus for protein density. And apparently she's not alone, so she tells me. Certainly no one is doing this in Italy, though, so, everything with a grain of salt. In LA, we also have a lot of people...
Which pasta is more carb-loaded?
Yeah, but, the protein craze is kind of, just... People in Italy just think differently about, nutrition, and it's not around protein density. It's around digestibility, and, it's not going away.
Right. Okay. Which is probably neither is wrong.
I think it's it's a totally different approach to well-being, right? They just eat much less, but then when they do eat things, they care about the quality of the ingredients and the digestibility of it because they think that that's what keeps you slim.
Right.
That's if that's an old wives' tale, it's an old wives' tale that all of Italy
something seems to be working. Yeah.
There isn't obesity at the level in Italy yet that there is other places. In LA, we also have a lot of protein water. So if you haven't come across protein water, it's coming for you because it's everywhere in LA. So there's a new entrant, Plain Speak. Nutra is another one. You have a friend who loves a particular one that tastes like lemonade. Can't remember the name.
Yeah. I mean, I think this is a real thing. I'm all for this because, as we talked about earlier, the protein powder, specifically in traveling with protein powder, our hotel room doesn't need to look like a Coke den if I could just put it in my water and drink it that way. I think the protein water is an amazing solve logistically and otherwise.
Yes. So it's interesting to deal with. We also tried Plain Speak because they sent us some and Kirsten said it was tasty. So order yourself some if you'd like to support a women-owned business. And then on the pendulum swing, it's not really a pendulum swing, but it's more of a criticism of this entire space, which feels fitting for me. So there's a brand called Sneakies, which is all about sneaking full serving sizes of fruit and vegetables into a bag of food for your kids. So I can't remember what the food is that they're giving, but they were it's chicken or something. And then it's it has a full serving size of fruit and vegetables per bag. It was pancakes. So it's pancakes. I go because I'm great. I mean, I actually don't have a child who has a problem with fruit and vegetables, but you do.
I do.
And it's a common thing. My child just doesn't like to eat meat, but everybody has a picky eater of some variety. So I was curious, what does this involve? 5 spinach leaves, and half an apple. And we're counting that as a full serving of fruit and vegetables. I don't know on what planet 5 leaves of anything can count towards.
But is that an FDA standard that is the person you should be mad at, or is it the...
Well, but this is my whole feeling on this situation, right? Is who is, even if it's the FDA, even if it's the brand, there's no great, obviously, governing body that we can trust. So what is it? And I just don't feel they do list out per thing, what they're doing. So I guess there is some level of transparency to it. But it just feels if that's the level that you're trying to reach, you should probably be 5 spinach leaves isn't enough. This is the FDA standard, and we're going to put 100 spinach leaves in there.
Yes, I like that framing.
What on earth are we doing? So,
I mean, we need a whole podcast on beyond the status quo.
Yeah. So it's just if that is what we're trying to, I don't know any human being who's a parent who would look at 5 spinach leaves and a half an apple and think that that is a good, solve. I'm so sorry.
Fair enough. Yep.
All right. Final one, because we're coming into a close, because we only have 10 minutes left. Institutions are cool again. I should have an asterisk next to this. Because...
Yes, you should.
I would like to say that, so I'll start with my first argument and I'll finish with my closing argument. So institutions are cool again, asterisks. We'll ignore the asterisks for a second. So institutions are cool again in the sense that previously if you were a brand and it was you were having a meeting and you can picture this, literally this is all of the last 5 years. It was who should we do a collab with? It would be some internet native emerging cool challenger brand that you would default to, right? You'd be Fly by Jing, for example. No shade on Fly by Jing. They're fucking amazing. I actually think that you could consider them to be a legacy brand at this point because they've certainly moved past being a challenger emerging brand. But 5 years ago, like Flybajing would be it, right? Now what we're seeing in the last couple of weeks is so many establishments kind of being, or institutions being collaborated with. So we have Aritzia with the Juilliard School. There was another one, Bodhi came out with, I don't even have it on this list, but Bodhi did a collab with another, like Yale School of Music. And then we have Paul Abrams, who's an incredible photographer, and he did his performance inside of the New York Times offices as like the location of the dance. Like, it's like their offices are cool. And then we had Green Room, which has a new collab with the Botanical Gardens of New York, in the New York Botanical Gardens. And they also like redid the Stone Cottage, the famous Stone Cottage in the Botanical Gardens. And they redid the entire interior. You can't go in there publicly, but like they did all of the wallpaper, all of the like furnishings, like they revamped it so that it's really nice. So it's just interesting. Like, again, have we ever like collaborated with institutions? Yes. But was it the default for the last 5 years?
Yeah, no, this definitely feels new. It feels like Timothée Chalamet's like Nightmare, which I kind of love.
Yes.
But it feels like just really beautiful, thoughtful, one of like experiences, which I think the world needs more of, like artistic experiences. But yeah, this definitely feels new.
Yeah. So it's, there's a lot happening here that's exciting. And I think it's interesting. So, okay. So now I'm going to go to my asterisks, right? Just to like close this out.
Okay.
So
Yes.
I just want to caveat this to anyone listening who's like, oh, institutions are back, is that institutions in general are very much not back. Like institutional trust is at an all-time low. Like establishment thinking, whether it be healthcare, government, any kind of governing body of any kind, anything legacy is not really being positively viewed at the moment. But I think the arts, and I would classify the Botanical Gardens as an art form, because I'm generous like that, but also it's true, is very much an exception to that rule. So viewing the arts, I think the arts right now are getting a level of respect because of the influx of slop that they've never had before, right? So I think we're going to see so much coming around ballet. I think we're going to see more around like classical music. I think we're going to see so much stuff around really, truly appreciating as a culture the art.
Mm-hmm. And you think it's a reaction to AI and AI slop, like just all of this shit and going and having this deep cultural, beautiful experience that may be a one of, like our souls are all like in need of.
Yes. And I think that's where you're seeing, like you have to still do it well. You have to do it with respect. If you look at Green Room, the Stone Cottage is beautiful. Like Aritzia's collection and how they work with the Juilliard School, like the art direction on that, not just the product. Like the product was fine actually, but the art direction on the shoot and how they worked with the students and like all of these things is just really celebratory and beautiful. And I think that we have, as a culture, sort of like been essentially starved of that.
Mm-hmm.
And then when we see it, we're like,
yeah, I love that.
That's
yeah.
right.
Amazing. I'm so here for this.
All right. And then I put,
the swing.
So saying that, so yes, you could say that like institutions in general being like not in is the swing, but I like to have my pendulum swings come from examples that I have in the letters because that's just how I roll and I like my own rules. And so my rule is that the example has to come from the letters. And so the example that I pulled is a legacy brand that you brought up that's like kind of what I would consider an old guard brand, whether you want to call it legacy. It's an institution, certainly. It's just like a brand that has an audience that it just completely doesn't get. And that was AARP. So AARP sent you like a cooler that was like the least inspiring thing you could ever imagine.
Yeah.
And again, like it's really not shade on the idea of the AARP. Like
no,
none of that. It's on their misunderstanding of their consumer or their audience. Like maybe it's not really so much of a consumer, but like it's clear to me that they have still not really understood where silvers are going. And I wouldn't put you as a silver, but like it's like, this group of people that is coming into their orbit of their like manufactured like age range, right, that they've created, which is again outdated because it's a mindset issue, not a like it's like again, like, don't come in and assume that somebody is like ready for AARP. Like that's completely like a misinterpretation of the entire mindset to begin with. So I could just go on and on and on about this, but
yeah, I mean, this is we could have a whole podcast on this, and maybe we should. I think it's fascinating the comments that came up in this post, and I think the differing kind of opinion, and I think also the silence from AARP, because there were a ton of people that were flagged. There were a ton of people, and to me, it's really seeing the opportunity. Like, what a rad opportunity for somebody that turns 50, getting a letter of fucking empowerment. You don't give two shits anymore. You don't you're in this amazing era. Like, yes, give me those. Just give me a letter. Give me something that isn't a cooler that nobody's ever going to use, that is in no way exemplary of what we should be celebrating, feeling, and saying when somebody turns 50. I think it's just missing the whole, like, it's not a shade. It's that there's such a fucking opportunity to do something so impactful. Do that.
yeah. Yes. We do actually have some AARP senior executive readers. So maybe one of
We
them
would
is
love to help.
listening. We would love to help. And if you are their friend, you can send this to them and say, again, no shade, just something that needs to be updated.
And it can be so inspiring. Can be that's a dream. Like, that's probably
literally
both
my
of our
dream client.
Yeah.
To
So
redo a
yes.
silver brand is on my bucket list for.
But as iconic
2026.
as that, and be able to like make such a change, like
Yes.
we're here for it.
Please
Amazing. This
sign
was
me up.
great. It was amazing. It was fun. It was insightful as I knew it would be. So I stand behind it.
Yeah.
Everything I said at the beginning.
And now a word from our sponsors. I don't even know where these ads are going. But
It's already out again.
If you already listened to our sponsor, then hopefully you give them some support and love. And I hope you enjoyed this, and tune in every month or apparently month-ish, for an episode of Good Science.
Yes. And subscribe, wherever you watch it, listen to it. Make sure that you check that box, subscribe. If you liked it, share it with somebody. And if you like us, give the algorithm a little love. Stay curious.
Ciao, ciao.
That was it for this episode of Good Thinking. Don't forget to tune in next week.
If you found this valuable, subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast app.
And don't forget to read on Substack for even more insights.
And if you really liked it, drop us a heart. We'd love to hear from you.
Ciao. Until next time.